Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. Broiler chickens, along with eggs, are the bread and butter products of our farm. They're where we make the majority of our money, and they were also our first and still our most popular products. In this video, I want to talk about what it takes to raise Cornish Cross broiler chickens, with a particular emphasis on what it takes to start chicks in cold weather. Right now, the daytime temperatures are running in the 40s, night times are below freezing. So we've developed a whole bag of tricks to get them going in this cold weather and to keep them going out on the pasture before it really warms up in the summer months. The reason we time chicks this way for the first week of April is because it coincides with having them ready for Memorial Day weekend, which traditionally is a huge barbecue weekend and a good sales weekend for us. And it also gets the jump on some of our competition who don't come out with chicken until really the middle of June or the end of June. So it helps us, but it takes a little extra work. Our chicks come from Moyer Hatchery in Pennsylvania, and we selected them because they're close, and shipping distance is a big thing. Normally their chicks hatch on Monday sometime during the day. They put them in the mail that day, and we get them on Wednesday morning. We pick them up directly from our local post office, so that's less than 48 hours in the mail. Now, the last thing a chick does before it hatches out of the egg is it sucks up the rest of the nutrients in the egg. So a chick can survive up to 3 days before it eats or drinks, but they're much better if you can get them within 48 hours. This batch that we have in here got stuck in the Postal Service because, like everything, the Postal Service's times are affected by the COVID virus and workforce problems and all that. So we got these chicks on Thursday morning, and there was an increased mortality rate. We've lost 15 thus far. I talked to the hatchery, and like any good hatchery, they promised to replace in the next shipment the ones that we lost due to the mail service hang-up. Our brooder house is really simple construction. It's just arched cattle panels that I got from the farm store. There's 4 of them in a row here, which makes it about 16 feet long. It sits on a plywood base that's about 2 foot tall, and that's just to increase the headroom inside so we can walk upright comfortably. We get a good amount of solar heating because it's covered with plastic, and when it gets too hot, we just put a tarp over it, and that cuts down on the solar gain. But for this time of year, when the temperatures are so cold outside, it works great. Like I said, we're running 40 degrees or so outside during the day. In the brooder house, it's 80 degrees or more. The ends of this house are just made from 2x3s and plywood, and on the end opposite the door here we made an adjustable ventilation opening. So the fan's kind of in the way, but all you have to do is pull this bolt out and it drops down, so we can adjust how much fresh air is getting in and regulate the temperature of the house that way. Right now we keep it mostly closed up to trap the heat in, and we just run a simple box fan to move air through it in the summertime. And then on the door end, it's just a door on a hold open, so we can hold that open when it's hot too and move air through here. There's a screen on the top part of the door here, which we cover with a feed bag when it's cold out and just staple it on, and then when it gets warmer out, we'll take it off so air can move through. We run 3 pens in this house, and they'll be going all summer. We stagger broilers from this pen to this pen, so in 2 weeks we'll get another batch to go in this pen while these guys are finishing up and getting ready to go out in the field, and they just alternate back and forth all summer long. The third larger pen, we start laying pullets in there as chicks starting in May, and then once they move out we start our Thanksgiving turkeys in there toward the end of June. So all 3 bays are in use pretty much all summer long. And there's quite a story behind how these pens are built. We started out with just these plywood build-outs with just a dirt bottom and no lids. Well, a couple years in, the rats got underneath and killed a whole batch of chickens in one night. They tunneled under and pulled the chicks down into the tunnels, and it was just a terrible thing. So I used heavy gauge hardware cloth and put bottoms in them with that to keep the rats out. We have to replace that every couple of years because the manure still rots it out, and I'd love to have a concrete slab under this thing, but it's in use all summer long, so the timing makes it difficult to pour a concrete slab, and it's on that to-do list that it seems like farms always have. Anyway, so we had a good bottom on that, and that stopped the problem. Well, one night we left a plank laying against one side of one of these pens like this, and the rats used it as a gangway for their chicken dinner. They came up the plank at night, down into the pen, and again, we lost a whole bunch of chicks. So then I took the time to make these lids for them, and these lids work really nice. They're hardware cloth as well. They come down and they come up for when we want to clean the bedding or feed and water the chicks. It was a lot of work, but now we have secure pens. A nice thing about building this out of cattle panels is we have a pre-made grid for hanging everything from, because depending on the temperature and which bays are in use, we move these brooder lamps around. So they can hang from these chains on the ceiling. When it's cold out like this, we hang them directly from the hardware cloth to get them closer to the chicks. And we have extension cords that just run around and we relocate as we needed. Sometimes we'll have as many as 10 brooder lamps running in here at once, so having them be flexible and able to move around easily is really important. I have a bunch of tips for starting these guys out right. If you don't know what you're doing, you can lose half a batch in a couple days, because again, like I said, these guys are a lot more difficult to grow than layer chicks. On day one, chicks need 100 degrees ambient temperature to survive. And it works on a curve, so by 3 weeks or 21 days old, these guys will be hardy to 40 degrees. But when we first get them, we need to pay careful attention to how much heat they're getting. And to do that in cold weather, when these are dropped down, we put 2-inch styrofoam over the top, like this. And it doesn't need to cover the whole brooder, but it acts like a hover lamp would, where it traps the heat in. And so we'll run it this way all day and night and just take them off when we're feeding and watering them. The other thing we do is, of course, we increase the heat lamps. So there's 4 250 watt heat lamps in here. By May we'll be running 3 and shutting them off a good part of the time, because again, the solar heating in here does wonders for maintaining ambient temperature. We pay particular attention to their bedding when it's cooler outside. We use pine wood shavings, and these are great for absorbing moisture. We just keep piling them on to keep them dry. And what you always want to look for when you're starting chicks is seeing whether they huddle or not. If they huddle tightly, and they're huddling now, but I think it's because they're scared more than cold. But if they huddle tightly, that means they're too cold and they're getting body heat from each other. So you need to increase the heat either by adding more lamps, more insulation, or increasing the temperature of your brooder house. Little changes you make in raising broiler chicks can have amazing results, and here's one. I happened to be talking to the hatchery last year, and they mentioned withholding feed from newly arrived chicks, and that's something we never did. As soon as they came, we'd put feed and water in for them. The hatchery said to hold their feed for 2 hours, water them as soon as they're in the pen, but wait to put the feed in for 2 hours. So we tried it, and it decreased our mortality rate by probably, I don't know, 5% or so. It was an amazing difference, just that one little thing. Our normal routine is to hold these chicks in the brooder for 14 to 21 days, if it's warm outside. At this time of year, we'll hold them 21 to 28 days to make sure that they don't go out until the temperatures are agreeable to them. And one thing that we do is, if they're growing so that they start to crowd this pen, is there's a removable door here. It's just a cobbled together door so that they can expand into these 2 pens, and we can grow them out a little longer in here, probably up to 5 weeks before we move them out into the field. As long as these chicks are in the brooder, they get as much food and water as they want. We use these really cheap trays, and they work fine. You just flip open the lid and you can put more in. And as the chicks get older, we'll just add more trays as they eat more and more. And by the 3rd week, you really start to see an increase in how much they're eating. When we move the broilers out into the field and into these pasture pens, which we move every day, then we'll start to regulate their feed. We learned our lesson the hard way on that. If you feed a Cornish Cross chicken too much, it will just eat itself to death. So we feed on a schedule that we've developed over the years to make the birds big without getting them too fat and resulting in a lot of leg problems and health problems, also with a result of decreased mortality. But because the temperature's cooler with these early batches, we have to up that feed schedule. So we'll feed them about 20% more feed than we would normally to make up for what the chicks need to heat themselves in this cold weather. These 6-day-old chicks are cute, but I'll be happy when they're 7-week-old chickens and barbecue season starts. Raising Cornish Cross chickens is just like anything else on the farm. You need to pay attention to detail for the animal to thrive. I hope this video was informative. Stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.